mental illness and guns. We have seen over the last number of months in recent years a plethora of horrific examples of individuals who are suffering from mental illness prepare, make plans, intend, and carry out well laid out plans that involve killings of students on university campuses, young elementary students in Connecticut, theater goers in Aurora, Colorado, not to mention Virginia Tech. And the answer, it seems to me, in dealing with the issue of mental health and mental illness and the use of firearms is basically twofold. We have to initially address the issue of mental illness. What we need to do is come to a reality of what mental illness is, an awareness of the reality of mental illness, that individuals that have a broken mind, those individuals are no different than an individual who has a broken leg. Those individuals must be treated. The indicators that might tip off individuals who are not mentally ill, that the person is going under a period of stress, that the indicators might involve, for instance, rantings and ravings on the internet about homicidal ideations, perhaps statements to fellow students that an individual might be affecting harm to himself or to others. It might be evidencing mental illness. That's where it begins. To give you an absolutely perfect example, the killings that occurred at Virginia Tech, this young man that killed these individuals had a record, a history recorded of a mind that was obviously so mentally ill that he had planned and prepared to kill any number of students. Never was there an alert that went out to law enforcement about the nature of this individual and the concern that must be expressed about this particular individual. The young man that walked into the theater, Aurora, we find out today that, for instance, he has told a psychiatrist that he had homicidal ideations, that he intended to kill people. That was never passed on. And if it was in fact passed on, the administrators at the university and the security police did nothing about it. Those matters have to stop. In Houston, we are blessed by having individuals with law enforcement, our leaders in our city and county governments, the sheriff of this county. We are blessed in that they are taking a very active role in recognizing the mentally ill and hopefully being able to desensitize, if you will, the likelihood that individuals that are mentally ill would use acts of violence in order to effectuate a concept or a thought process that the mentally ill mind has created and determined to be the right thing to do. Not too long ago, in 1996, I represented an individual who had been a Vietnam veteran. He had been suffering from post-traumatic stress as a result of his activities in Vietnam. Came back, went to the VA, was examined by a psychiatrist, got adequate medication, was released by the VA, got a good job, hurt his back on the job, could not work. Workman's comp ran out, stopped buying medication because he simply couldn't afford the medication. The medication was an antipsychotic. He had a young boy going to an elementary school here in town. And one night, his wife notices that he is mumbling to himself, that is the father, that he is acting in a very bizarre manner. The day before, he had used his credit card to go out and purchase 2 weapons, bandoliers of ammunition, no background check on whether or not the person had ever been diagnosed or suffered from any type of mental illness, gets the guns, piles the guns into the car that very next morning, drives to the school, suffering the delusion that he was called upon by God to free the students from a slave ship, thinking the school was a slave ship. Walks into the elementary school. There are 2 police officers who are armed at the school, and the officers, in effect, don't get the drop, if you will, on my client. He in turn pulls his gun and shoots both officers. Thank goodness they were wearing bulletproof vests. Neither one had been killed. And one is still with the force. The other is no longer here in the city of Houston. He cranks out 16 rounds of ammunition. Doesn't hit anybody, with the exception of the 2 officers who live. The kids are scared, run for miles away from the school. He's arrested, brought down, and gives a confession. Obviously, the confession was just so bizarre in nature because it exhibited his true belief that was his call to free the school from African, or at least free the children at the school from the slave ship. I get his records from VA, and I have the custodian of records from VA to come down and testify during the trial. His records consist of 1 page, and it included only his name, his serial number, his rank, and his diagnosis, 2 words, probably psychotic. That was it. Given medication and allowed to go off. We have got to improve the way that we communicate our issues concerning schools and concerning situations that would prevent the reoccurrence of what happened to my client. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity and is today a contributive member to this community. Law enforcement in particular has taken heed of these warnings. We have established with the Houston Police Department one of the finest police units in the entire country. Houston HPD has in fact been designated by the Department of Justice as one of 4 cities in this country to have pilot programs in the areas of having squads that are trained to defuse potentially violent situations as a result of mental illness. These teams are known as CERT and the CIT, Crisis Intervention Training Teams. With CERT, an officer is dispatched to a scene with a social worker, riding with that officer side by side. There might be a scene that the officer goes to that has a husband who has had a number of mental health encounters in the past, going berserk with a machete. They more often than not are able to diffuse the individual who is mentally ill and prevent acts of violence. In the past, we would have the SWAT team out and take the guy out. Those things still happen, but they are becoming less and less frequent. Suicide by cop. I have a case, for instance, involving a young man who went to Occupy Houston, carried a gun with him. a rifle, allowed to walk down the street with a rifle. I get his records before, and he is truly so mentally ill that he is on the internet ranting and raving and just wanting somebody to shoot him. He was afraid to take his own life because that would mean that he would go to hell. And so he walks into Tranquility Park with a rifle, and he points the rifle at the ground, and he points the rifle to his head. And there are a number of people around. He's asking people to shoot him. He is then shot by the police. I have no quarrel with that. Those police officers had no idea what was about ready to happen to the multitude of individuals in the Tranquility Park at that time. But he was shot once in the back and once in the leg. He is okay physically, and mentally he is much better than he was before. But then the officers filed on him for aggravated assault. They claimed that he had pointed the gun at them, and they had, in effect, beat him down to the courthouse and filed charges. Luckily, two bystanders who had cell phones photographed the entire incident, and at no time did my client point at the officers. I visit with him in the hospital. He is chained to the bed. He's begging me to get the officer outside, who is sitting outside of his bed, to come and shoot him in the hospital. He wants to die and doesn't want to commit suicide. Truly somebody that's mentally ill. And that case is set for trial sometime in January, probably June of this summer. There's one final example that I would like to discuss, and it concerns, for instance, the ability of a parent to come to the aid and assist a child at a university who happens to be under stress, either as a result of a failing grade or failing in school, or discipline problems, or breakup of a relationship. The parent is not permitted to know, the school is not permitted, the school administrators are not permitted to tell the parent, the most supportive entity in that child's life, that this child is going through struggle, unless the child indicates that he or she is a danger to herself or himself or others. Now that has to be changed. I've talked to a number of educators. Their hands are tied, and only when we come up with something creative, for instance, having students, when they enroll in a university, sign a waiver to permit the parents to be told if that child becomes depressed or evidences indications of some type of mental illness, aside from being a danger to self or others. That has to have happen so that we can hopefully prevent from the very beginning any outbreak of that we have seen, unfortunately, in the last number of years on our campuses. This past Wednesday, I had the fortune to testify before the Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence at the Texas Legislature. We were advocating, and I was advocating, as we've done for the last 4 sessions, 8 years, a change in the insanity standard in the state of Texas. Take the word no out of the standard, as in not knowing what you're doing is wrong, and putting the word appreciate in the standard. A simple tweaking of language, which would give a more subjective approach to the entire definition, permitting doctors who are medically trained to come into the courtroom and explain mental illness to the juries on both sides, both for prosecution and defense. This time, both prosecution and defense have agreed that the change is necessary. But I was astounded to be in that committee room and listen to some of the comments being made by the legislatures or legislators who make the decisions about how to fund individuals and entities that deal with mental illness. Everything from throw the key away, never let them out. It's the subject of the citizenry that causes great concern, that we need to rid ourselves of these people. We are not back in the days of Salem. We are not back in the days when we burned people at the stake, thinking that they are in effect demons when they are going through a psychotic episode with delusions. But still, we have the type of mentality in the higher reaches of our government that give me cause for great concern. And until we are able to convince these individuals that appropriations, funding, more beds, more hospital beds need to be enacted so that these people can be taken care of, we will never eliminate the fear that these individuals have expressed. And I hope that one day we'll get there.